On August 16, 2018, the world mourned the passing of Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. During her week-long funeral services, the Queen of Soul herself lay in a solid bronze casket plated in 24-karat gold, surrounded by pink and lavender roses. Her outfit was changed no less than 3 times for her multiple viewings, including 2 days at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. She was transported between them in a classic 1940 Cadillac LaSalle hearse, the same one that had transported civil rights legend Rosa Parks. An affair so big, so lavish, and so historic could not be trusted to just any funeral director. So Aretha Franklin's send-off was carried out by one of Detroit's most trusted mortuaries, Swanson Funeral Home. The company's founder, O'Neil Swanson, is shown in some of the footage of that day, directing pallbearers and attending to other details. He was interviewed by several national media outlets, where he introduced his son and fellow funeral director, O'Neil Swanson II. But what those reporters didn't know was that O'Neil Swanson II was not actually a funeral director anymore and had been refusing to speak to local reporters as to why. So let's get into it. Hi folks, and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new here, my name is Delaney, and usually on this channel I like to take deep dives into murder cases, and I tend to cuss a lot. But this month I'm going to mix it up a little. No murders, but definitely some crimes involving dead bodies. I really want to call this series Cadaver Crimes, but that name was already taken by my queen, Caitlin Doty.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're scum!
So I guess I'll just have to go with Corpse Crimes, which doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well. Oh, and content warning, there's going to be some super gross details having to do with human remains. I'll try to put warnings and timestamps if you need to skip over them. So now, let's get into the case of the shady character behind the scenes at Aretha Franklin's funeral. To do that, we need to start at the beginning with Swanson Funeral Home. Swanson Funeral Home was established in Detroit in 1958. It was extremely successful, catering to the African American community in the then booming Motor City. O'Neil Swanson Sr., who had graduated cum laude from Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science, was considered a pillar of the African American business community there, winning several awards and accolades during his 6 decades of doing business there.
Welcome back to Detroit Wants to Know. We're coming to you from the fabulous Hotel St. Regis, and it's our 100th episode. I have with me the Dean of African American Business in Detroit. I have O'Neil Swanson. Mr. Swanson?
Swanson's business eventually expanded to 4 locations, 2 in Detroit, another in Pontiac, and another in Flint. The Flint location, though, was actually independently owned and operated by his son, O'Neil Swanson II. Not Junior, the second. But I'm just going to call him Junior. The Flint location advertised itself as a cheap, no-frills mortuary. It didn't host viewings or services, and its cremation packages cost as little as $700. Now, I get the need for low-cost mortuary services. Not everyone has the money or the wish to spend thousands of dollars on a big, showy funeral. But also, you get what you pay for. While the Swanson name carried a lot of weight, it doesn't look like Senior's professionalism had been passed on to his son. As far back as 1998, clients had been making misconduct complaints against Junior, including one family who described the place as, quote, filthy, and claimed they only received their loved ones' cremains in an unmarked plastic bag, and then only after weeks of badgering him.
They shuffled us in the back room so we wouldn't make too much noise.
After an hour and a half in the back room, we started pounding on the door saying, hey, let us out of here. Something's not right. You could smell the stench of the bodies. There were white pillows laying around with body fluid on them. The carpet was all ripped up. There were cockroaches crawling up and down the wall, and at that point we knew we made a horrible mistake.
To this day, they still don't believe that they have their loved ones' actual cremains. In 2004, he was fined $10,000 and placed on probation for 2 years for committing fraud, deceit, or dishonesty, basically overcharging his clients and tacking on bogus hidden fees. In 2018, he was fined another $5,000 as part of an agreement with the state, although the reason why is unclear. Between 2012 and 2016, the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration cited him 4 times for serious and repeated violations, but the worst was yet to come. In October 2015, prompted by a complaint from a funeral director at another facility, the state inspectors paid Swanson Funeral Home in Flint another visit. There, they discovered 2 bodies stored in the unrefrigerated garage. According to their report, one of the bodies had been there for at least 5 months. Shockingly, the funeral home was not shut down. About a year later, the state agency got another anonymous call about bodies being stored in the garage. When investigators arrived on the property, they noted that, quote, the stench of decomposition could be detected 30 feet away from the garage. And here's where it gets gross. I'll put a timestamp here if you want to skip over this part. So, inside the unrefrigerated garage were 10 bodies in cardboard boxes, leaking fluids onto the floor, which was covered in maggots.
Oh, hell no!
The investigators also found a, quote, unsanitary preparation room without equipment or supplies necessary for embalming, and, quote, blood and fluid-stained casket pillows were laying in the hallway. Okay, nasty details over, for now. Stating that the public health, safety, or welfare requires emergency action, the state's regulatory agency shuttered the Swanson Funeral Home in Flint in July 2017. The agency also revoked Junior's mortuary science license. Seeking to distance himself from his son's actions, Swanson Sr. told the press, quote, the allegations the state has made against the Flint home are shocking and go against every principle of mortuary science. He also made clear that his son's funeral home, despite sharing the same name, was completely separate from his businesses in Detroit and Pontiac. After further investigation, the regulatory agency referred the case to the Michigan Attorney General's office. The AG executed search warrants on the funeral home and Junior's residence. That's when investigators discovered that he had also been skimming money from his customers again. About 70 prepaid funeral contracts totaling more than $75,000 were either unfunded, underfunded, or not properly escrowed. Only days after working the Aretha Franklin funeral, Junior was in court facing 10 felony charges, all related to financial crimes. He plea bargained down to 2, for which he pled no contest. He was sentenced to 11 months imprisonment, delayed, and ordered to pay $75,000 in restitution. Apparently, no charges were filed in relation to the mishandling of human remains. But that was not the end of O'Neill Swanson II's crimes. Since he'd been stripped of his mortuary science license, he was no longer allowed to work or own businesses in the cemetery, mortuary, or crematory fields. Regardless, in March 2020, around the same time that his father died, he started Comfort Cremation Services, LLC, under his wife's name. The company, which was just Junior, his wife, and their lawyer, then purchased Tri-County Crematory in Ypsilanti, Michigan, not to be confused with the other Tri-County Crematory in Georgia, which is an even worse case. Anyway, Junior, even though he was still under his delayed sentence, went right back to his old ways. Acting on a tip, in June 2021, state investigators and sheriff's detectives raided Tri-County Crematory. What they found inside, they described as, quote, like a horror show. Inside, they found backed up toilets that didn't work, mold on the floors, and severe rot and damage to the structure itself. But that was not the worst of it, and timestamp here for gory details. Inside the crematorium, where the thermostat was set at a sweltering 77 degrees, investigators found at least 55 bodies in cardboard containers stacked 2 deep. Like at his previous funeral home, the bodies were not embalmed and had fluid and maggots leaking out of the containers. Weirdly, one of these bodies belonged to someone who had died in December 2018, before he even bought the place, which will be important later. Okay, end of gory details. The day after the raid, the regulatory agency issued a cease and desist order to shut down Tri-County Crematory immediately, since it was being run illegally. However, there continued to be a lot of suspicious activity at the business. A neighbor noticed more smoke coming from the crematory, and a refrigerator truck was spotted parked on the property. One man called police and reported that Junior had offered him $100 to help him move some bodies into that truck. So, nearly 3 weeks after the original raid, Ypsilanti Township code enforcement officials got a search warrant for the property. The officials stated he found at least 30 caskets inside with, quote, the leftovers of someone inside them. Quote, the deceased from 2018 has 2 to 3 inches of liquid at the bottom.
Oh, hell no!
The building was immediately condemned as a biohazard. On October 5th, 2021, O'Neill Swanson II was charged with only 1 count of improper disposal of dead bodies, a felony that carries a maximum sentence of 10 years and $50,000. He was also charged as a habitual offender, but in a last-minute twist, the judge in the case dismissed the charges. He accepted Junior's claim that the bodies had been present at the crematory at the time he purchased it, and since the disposition of those bodies wasn't explicitly spelled out in the contract, then Junior wasn't responsible for them. So then in March of this year, Junior brought suit against AG Dana Nessel, alleging malicious prosecution and that she destroyed his business and sullied his reputation.
Sure, Jan.
And just to make it even weirder, his attorney in that suit is Gregory Roll, who worked with Sidney Powell and others to try and use the courts to overturn the 2020 election results in Michigan. The Michigan Attorney Grievance Commission recommended disciplining Roll and the others for their part in the scam. At the time I'm filming this, Roll is still licensed to practice law in Michigan, and O'Neill Swanson II's case against Dana Nessel hasn't gone to court yet. But something tells me this shit show is far from over. So that's all I've got for this story. Thank you so much for sticking with me. If you enjoyed it, click all the buttons, support me on Patreon, all that. You know the deal. Till next time.